Dragon cargo vehicle. It's Friday, August 26, 2016, and you're joining us here as usual inside of Mission Control Houston, located at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Inside the room right now sits the Orbit 1 team, the early morning shift, ready to oversee this operation to say farewell to this cargo craft. Leading the team there at the top of your screen is Flight Director Ed Van Cise. He's going to be overseeing the Orbit 1 team while they support the crew members on board. And just next to him at the Capcom position is NASA astronaut Victor Glover. He's going to be serving as the voice communication link between the teams down here on the ground and the crew up in space. And right now, 2 Expedition 48 crew members are standing by inside the International Space Station to send the final command that will send Dragon on its way in just about 23 minutes and change from now. NASA's Kate Rubins and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi, both first-time flyers on board the orbiting laboratory, are going to be at the robotics controls and will send the command that will send Dragon on its way. The crew has been doing a lot of work to get ready for this moment, including the packing of cargo into Dragon. It's been loaded up with about 3,000 pounds of cargo that it's going to be returning back down to Earth. Dragon, the only resupply craft capable of safe re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere and landing, is returning a lot of vehicle hardware, but of course, the very important stuff, all of the science that's been packed on board. The team closed the hatch yesterday afternoon after about 2 weeks of packing cargo, and then all of the commanding was handed over to the ground controllers, who in a first unbolted the vehicle, commanding the bolts on the common berthing mechanism that have held Dragon in place for the last month on the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module. And at 3:57 p.m. Central, 4:57 p.m. Eastern yesterday, the vehicle was unbolted to begin the slow maneuver to where it now sits in its release attitude. And overnight, while the crew slept, ground controllers working on the Canadarm2 robotic arm, the space station's main robotic workhorse, maneuvered Dragon away from Harmony out to where it now sits, just a few tens of feet away from the International Space Station. And again, that release coming up in just under 22 minutes from now is scheduled to take place at 5:10 a.m. Central Time, 6:10 a.m. Eastern. And after its release, Dragon will loiter for just a few moments while the robotic arm is slowly backed away, and then we'll begin a series of departure burns and maneuvers to move beyond the keep-out sphere around the International Space Station for its return trip to Earth. The Dragon capsule scheduled to splash down in the Pacific Ocean today at about 11:47 a.m. Eastern, 10:47 a.m. Central Time, with its typical landing zone about 300 miles southwest of Baja, California. And once Dragon is in the water, teams from SpaceX will move in and secure the capsule, put it on a ship, and bring it back to a harbor in Long Beach, California. And from there, all of the critical cargo items will be removed, including research, and handed over to NASA for return within 48 hours. Scheduled right now, weather pending to be slightly less than that, but Dragon will be put on that ship, transported to harbor, the cargo comes off, and then Dragon itself will be prepped for transfer over to SpaceX's facility in Texas. And the vehicle, which again is going to be bringing home about 3,000 pounds of cargo, vehicle hardware and experiment samples and other hardware, originally arrived at the station with just over 5,000 pounds of supplies, cargo, and hardware in tow. This vehicle launched on July 18th from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, sitting atop a Falcon 9 rocket. After a 2-day flight, it arrived at the International Space Station on July 20th, was grappled by the Expedition 48 crew on board and attached to the Earth-facing side of Harmony. And the crew has spent the last several weeks unloading cargo from Dragon and then executing a lot of the time-critical science that was carried up on board, especially those items that are set to return today. And just some of the new experiments that arrived on board the International Space Station thanks to this vehicle are doing things like helping investigators test whether or not they can sequence DNA in space, an exciting experiment that should be kicking off its first test run later today, but with a lot of eyes on that capability that we'll touch on later. A new temperature control technology that NASA is testing out that could be critical for future spacecraft looking to go well beyond Earth's orbit, and also a number of investigations through the National Lab function of the International Space Station. For those frequent followers, you'll know that on the U.S. side of the space station, the research is essentially split into two pieces. One half for NASA for all of the various research that we continue to do to prepare our astronauts and spacecraft and technologies for missions way beyond low Earth orbit. And then the other half for what's known as the National Lab, the station, a U.S. national laboratory capable of accepting research from academia and commercial entities.
Review is complete. We are holding for an on-time release in the window of 10:10 to 10:35.
We copy. Thank you.
Getting a quick update from NASA astronaut Kate Rubins again. She and Takuya Onishi from JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, are the ones that will be at the controls sending the command to detach Dragon.
Station Houston on 2, just for your planning purposes. The next step is going to be, next procedure is going to be 1.602, step 1. And I'll call you back in a minute with a go for that.
Copy. We'll get that open and take a look.
And everything from hatch closure to the detachment of Dragon from Harmony through the maneuver into the release attitude, all of that's gone smoothly so far. Everything marching towards that on-time release point of 5:10 a.m. Central, 6:10 a.m. Eastern. But just to again touch back on some of the research that was carried up and coming home, one of those experiments that was flown through the National Laboratory is the heart cells experiment, one that captured a lot of attention for some of the unique parts of how it ended up playing out on board the International Space Station. Scientists induced human skin cells to become stem cells, and then were then initiated and then forced to grow into human heart cells. And then these heart cells were cultured for 1 month on board the International Space Station. And then they're going to be analyzed for cellular and molecular changes. And NASA astronaut Kate Rubins was an integral piece at executing this experiment and was there to actually see as these heart cells started to mature a little bit, and then actually was able to witness them beating while on board. A very, very unique experience and a very unique experiment. And that heart cells investigation scheduled to come down in that 3,000 pounds of cargo on Dragon today. And that is just one of the many experiments that will then be sent back to scientists and other researchers down here on the ground for study. And again, that heart cells investigation providing insight into just how microgravity affects the human heart. A lot of changes to all of the bodily systems in the human body while you're in that microgravity, and increased radiation, basically the space flight environment. But like so much research, could also have some impacts here back down on Earth.
Go for Dragon configuration checks. Perform step 1 in 1.602, Dragon departure monitoring.
Copy. Go. Step 1 in 1.602, Dragon departure monitoring.
And things continuing to proceed smoothly with the upcoming release, again at 6:10 a.m. Eastern, 5:10 a.m. Central, of the Dragon spacecraft. Right now inside the room, Flight Director Ed Van Cise going around the room, getting a final go, no-go from all of the different console positions here in Houston and around the world. So we'll report out on how that proceeds shortly, but we are just under 15 minutes now and counting to the planned release of Dragon. And this was SpaceX's 9th commercial resupply mission. Along with Orbital ATK, SpaceX, one of 2 commercial companies currently responsible for flying thousands and thousands of pounds of cargo, different crew supplies to the space station.
LiDAR filter data, and the light and CCP LED status is complete as expected.
All right, we copy. Good news.
Again, this was SpaceX's 9th commercial resupply mission, along with all of the critical science that it delivered to the Expedition 48 crew. It also delivered a critical piece of hardware that's going to enable future commercial ventures to the International Space Station. In the trunk of Dragon, the unpressurized back end of the vehicle was the first international docking adapter, and this is a critical piece of hardware that was just installed during a spacewalk last week by NASA astronauts Jeff Williams and Kate Rubins. That is going to enable the docking of future U.S. commercial crew vehicles, those currently in development by Boeing and SpaceX, the Boeing CST-100 Starliner and the SpaceX's Crew Dragon, those scheduled to begin their first test flights next year and ultimately begin once again carrying astronauts, both from NASA and most likely the international partners, to the International Space Station from U.S. soil once again. And one of the really key things that we'll be looking for and a lot of the research community is excited about is the ability to add a 4th USOS crew member, so increasing by 1 person. And by doing that, we will be able to effectively double the amount of time dedicated to research every single week on board the International Space Station. You're able to do that since right now we're at basically the happy medium of the amount of time that you need just for all of the maintenance and the other upkeep work on board the station with 3 people. So adding another person could effectively dedicate the vast majority of their time to that research. So it will be a very exciting new chapter in the International Space Station once the crew is able to expand with the advent of those commercial vehicles, and just another chapter also in the expansion of commercial capabilities in low Earth orbit. A lot of that centered around efforts from the International Space Station, whether it's these commercial cargo vehicles, which we're getting to watch one depart now, the commercial crew vehicles, which we're looking forward to in just about a year's time, and the various commercial research and other hardware being developed and flown right now on board mankind's only orbiting laboratory. And we should be getting that video signal from the International Space Station momentarily, and we will have good communications coverage for the actual release moment. It looks like sunset should be just about 5 minutes after the release point, so hopefully should have good sunlight for the release of Dragon and then its subsequent departure. Again, the release time is scheduled right now for 6:10 a.m. Eastern, 5:10 a.m. Central, so just under 10 minutes from now. At the release, the robotic arm will slowly back away while Dragon idles for just a few moments before it begins a series of departure burns, maneuvers to get it out of what's known as the keep-out sphere, basically an imaginary 200-meter sphere around the International Space Station. And then once it's outside of that, it will begin its trip back through the Earth's atmosphere, setting up ultimately for that splashdown in the Pacific Ocean just before noon Eastern time. And there we go. We have that video back, and you can see Dragon still attached to Canadarm2, which again was used to detach the vehicle from the Earth-facing side of Harmony, and then maneuvered overnight while the crew was asleep to its now release point. And Kate Rubins from NASA and Takuya Onishi from JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, going to be sending the command to ultimately release Dragon. And that just under 9 minutes away. We got about 8 minutes, 40 seconds until the release window opens. And they'll have a window of about 25 minutes, which they can release Dragon. If they run into any issues, there are additional release windows down the line. But that first release window, everything's moved very smoothly so far, and expected to release on time in just about 8 minutes from now. And right now we're just under 5 minutes away from that release window opening. That release point should come right around 5:10 a.m. Central, 6:10 a.m. Eastern. The station itself right now just off the coast of Vietnam, flying about 250 statute miles over the Earth's surface. We will keep an eye on where it is at the actual time of release. But everything, again, continuing to move smoothly. The teams here in Mission Control ready for this release. The command going to be sent by Takuya Onishi and Kate Rubins on board the International Space Station, and we'll continue to have a good video signal throughout. So as long as the sunlight holds up and they hit the beginning of this window, we should get some pretty great views of Dragon departing the International Space Station. And it's been docked since July 20th, so a little over a month attached to the International Space Station for Dragon. And this, the 9th commercial resupply mission for SpaceX, ready to begin its journey home and a successful end to another successful mission. So just 3 minutes, 40 seconds away from that planned release. We'll continue to stand by and update you as new information comes through, but everything continuing to proceed. Looking forward to on-time release of Dragon. And we are now 2 minutes away from that release point.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2. You are go for release on time. Perform steps 2 to 4 in 1.320 Dragon release. The release time window opens at 10:10.
Copy, go for release on time. Window opens at 10:10, and that will give us a go for steps 2 through 4 in 1.320 Dragon release.
Good copy.
So under a minute and a half now. You heard Capcom Victor Glover call up the release time 10:10. That's GMT. That's what the station and all of the different control centers are operating on. For us here in Houston, the release window 5:10 a.m. For those in the East Coast, 6:10 a.m. Eastern Time. But just 1 minute and counting. We'll keep an eye on it, get you an exact time of release of Dragon and the station's location over the Earth, as right now it's passing over Indonesia, so should be in that area, but everything moving smoothly, should just be about 50 seconds away. And release window opening in 30 seconds. And so we're in the release window. We'll stand by now. The command should be given any moment. And so now standing by of release of Dragon. So K. Rubens and Takuya Onisha working through the steps, the snares in motion on the robotic arm, the Canadarm2, the end effector attached to Dragon. And we have release confirmed, and that's snares open, Dragon now free from the robotic arm. That release time 5:11 a.m. Central, 6:11 a.m. Eastern. And at the time of release, station was just about 251 statute miles over the Timor Sea, just north of Australia. Again, that release time 5:11 a.m. Central, 6:11 a.m. Eastern. SpaceX's Dragon now flying free from Canadarm2 and from the International Space Station. Everything looking good with the vehicle. Again, it'll gap will slowly open up between Canadarm2 and Dragon, and then Dragon will be able to execute its departure burns and maneuvers. Now you can see the Canadarm2 backing away from Dragon while it drifts just right about the same spot. Seven feet and widening now. Good view from cameras on board the station as the arm maneuvers back into its safe position. And so with that, the arm backed away. Dragon's departure armed should be moving out of the station's neighborhood any moment. And there you go. You can see the attitude control engines beginning to fire and Dragon on its way.
Houston Station on Space to Ground 2, Dragon depart successfully commanded.
Hey, we copy. Thank you. And Station Houston on 2, departure burn 1 is complete. Departure burn 2 in approximately 1 minute.
Copy.
Continuing to get a view right down the barrel of the station's robotic arm as Dragon departs. The first departure burn executed successfully, the second one coming in less than a minute. And again, it's going to do a series of these burns and maneuvers to move outside of the keep out sphere around the International Space Station. It's about a 200-meter sphere, and then setting it up for its return trip back to Earth, ultimately splashing down in the Pacific Ocean about 300 miles southwest of Baja, California. And again, that release time this morning, 5:11 a.m. Central, 6:11 a.m. Eastern, while the station and Dragon flew just about 251 statute miles over the Timor Sea, just north of Australia.
Station Houston on 2, departure burn 2 is complete. Go for SSRMS safing. Perform step 5 in 1.320. Departure burn 3 in approximately 7 minutes.
Copy, go, and we are monitoring departure burns.
Copy, and monitor per step 3 in 1.602.
And we are monitoring in block 3.
This room's a lot more. And as you just heard, the first 2 departure burns already executed successfully. The next one in about 6 minutes or so. Dragon continued to make its way away from the International Space Station following that successful release at 5:11 a.m. Central, 6:11 a.m. Eastern.
Houston and the SpaceX team from the station on Space Event 2. Congratulations to the entire team on the successful release of the Dragon. And thank you very much for bringing all science and all important payloads and all important cargoes to the station. We feel a little bit sad to see off the Dragon because we had a great time and enjoyed working on all sciences that the Dragon brought to us. So thank you very much to all team members.
Copy, and thank you for the good words. And to Expedition 48, thank you for all of your hard work and service, and Godspeed on the rest of your mission. And to the Dragon Recovery Team, fair winds and following seas.
And Dragon continuing to depart the area around the International Space Station. Will stick with it until it's outside of what's known as the approach ellipsoid. But hearing some congratulatory words from Takuya Onishi from the Japanese Space Agency to all of the teams down here on the ground and out at SpaceX for this mission. The SpaceX control teams out in Hawthorne who oversee operation of the vehicle during all of its powered flight phases from launch to approach to the station and now for the return trip home. Then there's another SpaceX team that's already standing by out on the West Coast that's going to be responsible for retrieving the capsule once it splashes down in the Pacific Ocean. That time scheduled right now at 11:47 a.m. Eastern, 10:47 a.m. Central, and it'll splash down a little over 300 miles southwest of Baja, California. Once Dragon's in the water, the teams will secure it, put it on a ship, and bring it back to a port just near Los Angeles and Long Beach. All of the time-critical science cargo will be offloaded and returned to NASA, and then on to researchers within 48 hours. And then all of the other vehicle hardware and things like that will begin to make their way back as well as the vehicle gets prepped for a trip to McGregor, Texas, SpaceX's facility for final decommissioning. Again, there's about 3,000 pounds of supplies packed inside of this capsule, which delivered just over 5,000 to the station, including a number of science experiments and the first international docking adapter, which is now securely attached to the International Space Station, preparing it for future U.S. commercial spacecraft. So everything going successfully so far today. The hatch closed yesterday. The maneuver overnight into the release attitude and the ultimate release with the command coming from NASA's Kate Rubins and Japan's Takuya Onishi. That command again came at 6:11 a.m. Eastern, 5:11 a.m. Central, while the station was flying 251 statute miles over the Timor Sea. And Dragon has so far executed all of its departure burns successfully. It's going to continue to slowly depart the area around the International Space Station and should be out of that approach ellipsoid in just a few minutes.
Station Houston on 2. Departure burn 3 is complete. Dragon is outside the keep-out sphere. Also, if you would please check the arm safe for us.
Copy. Departure burn 3 complete. Dragon outside the keep-out sphere. We're still watching it go and waving goodbye, and we will step into step 5 for arm safing.
Copy. Thank you.
And you just heard the call. Dragon has already executed 3 departure burns, now outside of the keep-out sphere. That's a 200-meter sphere around the International Space Station. That's a very critical passage point for any visiting vehicles that are going to be docking or departing with the International Space Station. The crew members on board also making sure that the Canadarm2 robotic arm is in its safing mode. And attitude control has already been returned to the International Space Station as it was in free drift per the usual plans for that actual release of Dragon. We should be seeing Dragon out of the approach ellipsoid in just about 4 minutes. But everything continued to go by the book this morning with the departure of SpaceX's 9th commercial resupply mission. Again, 3,000 pounds of cargo in tow and heading now on its way towards a splashdown in the Pacific.
Station Houston on 2. Dragon is outside the approach ellipsoid on a safe 24-hour free drift trajectory. And also, if you could, we saw that you guys started to break down that lab camera. If you could take that camera and point it at monitor 1 for us, we're going to do a few more troubleshooting steps.
Okay, Victor, copy outside approach ellipsoid, and we'll get you back at monitor 1 here. Thank you.
Domo arigato.
And so with that call from Capcom Victor Glover, Dragon outside of the approach ellipsoid, now officially on its way towards that splashdown in the Pacific. Just to recap, this morning Dragon was released successfully at 6:11 a.m. Eastern, 5:11 a.m. Central Time, with the command being sent by NASA's Kay Rubins and Japan's Takuya Onishi. Sending Dragon on its way. It's been docked for over a month. It docked back on July 28th, but released today while the station was 251 statute miles over the Timor Sea just north of Australia. Right now it's scheduled to splash down in the Pacific at about 11:47 a.m. Eastern, 10:47 a.m. Central, at which point the team from SpaceX will retrieve the capsule, bring it back into port, get all of the science and equipment off, and then SpaceX's 9th commercial resupply mission will officially be completed. So with that, we are go ahead and wrap up our coverage this morning of SpaceX departure. Thanks for waking up early and tuning in. A little bit later this afternoon, some of the crew members on board, Commander Jeff Williams and Flight Engineer Kate Rubins, will be speaking with the U.S. Secretary of the Interior at the Science Museum of Minnesota in St. Paul, Minnesota, for the 100th anniversary of the National Park System. So be sure to stick around and tune in later at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central here on NASA TV for that. But that will also wrap up the week for Expedition 48. So with that, we are going to go ahead and sign off. This is Mission Control Houston.